Can I just get my thumbs up? Folks, my name is Jordan Kanarick. I'm the founder of Kanarick Consulting, partner of CollegeWise, which is my former employer for 10 years prior to going out on my own. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about finding the right fit colleges. I have been a college counselor, specifically a college counselor, for a decade now. Prior to that, I worked at the Princeton Review, where I was the manager of counseling and tutoring there. And prior to that, I spent some time in the Gettysburg College admissions office. And prior to that, I was a Gettysburg College student. I'm very excited to be here tonight to discuss a little bit about the finding the right fit and everything that goes into it. And what I'd like to start with is an agenda. I want you to know where tonight's conversation is going, the different topics we are going to be covering throughout. So you'll find that a majority of the time, I'm not big on just reading the slides to you. From time to time, I might read something, but I put them up and I'm going to fill in the blanks. But my goal by the end of this session is that you have a keen understanding of what you need to do to identify what colleges are right for you and for your student. Because end of the day, there are over 4,000 accredited colleges and universities in the United States. Now, when you consider that number as a whole, that's pretty scary. Am I sitting here telling you that you now need to be prepared to research 4,000 plus colleges? No. My hope actually is that I put you in a position where you have an understanding of how to research a good number, 30, 40, 50, and be able to identify the right colleges for you without having to go through 4,000. But before we do that, I think it's important we consider the current state of the union collegiately. Everyone here is aware that there is a U.S. News World Rankings, and if you're not, please stay that way. Stay Golden Pony Boy. But U.S. News World Rankings is something that many people spend a lot of time focusing on. For some reason, we have this opinion that ranking has a huge impact on what happens in the future. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not the case. And if you don't believe me, Malcolm Gladwell did a whole series on this for the Google execs called Zeitgeist. I'll put that name in the chat for you. I might misspell it. I apologize. My German is rusty. But it's a 20-minute video where he talks to the Google execs about the importance of fit over prestige. And he goes specifically into colleges. It's a really powerful tool, but I bring it up today because the truth of it is, right now, people are applying to more colleges than ever before. And right now, they're applying to the same colleges. In 2022 to 2025, the number of applications that went out rose 3 million-fold. 3 million more applications went out between 2022 and 2025. And there's only a 19% increase in applicants. So it wasn't like there were thousands and thousands and thousands more applicants. It was just people applying to more and more colleges out of fear. And of those 3 million applications, 2 million of them went to the same 67 schools. 2 million more applications for what are basically the top 60 schools in the nation based on a ranking system that is flawed. So when you consider that as a whole, 67 schools saw 2 million of those 3 million increase. Well, what's 4,000 minus 67? 3,933 is 3,000. Yeah, 3,933, I think. My math might be off there. But that's how many other colleges are out there that didn't see that giant list. What is the list of 67 schools? As I mentioned, if you go to the U.S. News World Rankings, count 1 to 67. That's pretty much the list. The schools that everyone looks at from a ranking perspective, the schools that are on most people's minds are the schools that saw the big increase in applications. As I'm sure many of you know, that includes schools like your state school, University of Maryland. UMD went from being the school that many students in Montgomery County use as a backup to a school that denied a majority of the applicants who applied from your district this last cycle. There are trends that are happening within the admissions realm because of the way that we as the consumer are sort of breaking it. I don't know about you parents. When you applied to college, I don't know how many you applied to. When I applied to college, a little over, oh, wow. It's been 20 years. That scares me. Okay, moving on. 20 years ago, I applied to 10 colleges, and most of my friends applied to 5 or 6. The average number of applications that students in MCPS are applying to right now is around 15 or 16. Why? Because people are focused on prestige. When they're focused on prestige, they're throwing more applications out there, hoping that they're going to connect with one or more. So every year I have great students who decide after they apply to 10 or 12 schools with me, they're going to apply to a few more on their own. And I ask, oh, like what? University of Minnesota, DePaul? No. Columbia, Tufts, Brown, just to see what happens. And by the way, that is your prerogative. You get to make those decisions. But what I want you to take away from today is that there are certain ways to go about this process to make it less stressful, to make sure you have options, both from acceptance perspective and also your family finances. And my hope is that at the end of this, you know that while you can absolutely apply to Brown, Princeton, University of Michigan, University of North Carolina, these highly selective schools, there are a number of great other options out there for you. So let's dig in. We're going to go step by step here. The first step is to understand what's out there. There are private schools, there are public schools. There are community colleges, there are parochial colleges, which are a little bit more based on things connected to religion. There are schools that have wide open curriculums like Brown, and there are schools that have very structured curriculums like UPenn. A lot of the time, you'll find that people, when they focus on the ranking or the prestige of the school, they don't consider what it is that they need from college. They consider what it is that they like about that name, what they like about being able to tell people that that's where they got in. They don't often consider what they need to be successful. And that goes for students and parents alike. We live in a society where there are some pressures, where we saw our neighbor's kid get into Tulane. And so we want to kind of be able to say that our kid got into a school of a similar regard. But end of the day, that doesn't mean that our student will be successful there. It just means that we'll have the name that we wanted to tell people. And my hope is that as you walk away this evening, you know that the name doesn't impact what happens next. It is the opportunities afforded to you at each of these institutions. So you got to consider, what is it that you personally need to be successful in this process? I've spoken with students who say being close to home would stifle me. I want to be at least a plane ride away. I want to be more independent. I want to have this opportunity to grow and change away from home. I know some students who tell me how important family is to them, and they say that more than a 4-hour drive just isn't feasible for them. When you consider that right there, if you know that a 4-hour drive isn't feasible, that removes thousands of colleges from the conversation. 4 hours or less allows me to be close to home, get home to see grandma when I want, be home to be around mom and dad, to be there for my sibling, right? Well, now you're looking at less than a few hundred rather than a few thousand. You also have to consider what your statistics look like compared to the admissions stats. Sure, that school may still be test optional, like Boston University, but Boston University now has a 9.5% admit rate in regular decision. So just because they're test optional doesn't mean that being without a test score gives you a better shot at getting in. They're still going to look at your grades, your course rigor, and the reasons that you'd be a good fit for their institution. You have to consider what you want to study, what you do outside the classroom, and how it connects to these institutions. And one of the most important factors that I tell everyone is you have to consider the amount it costs to go to these colleges. There is no student I've ever said, yes, I think it is worth spending $90,000 to go here versus $30,000 to go here. You have to tell me why it would be. Explain that to me. I just had a conversation with one of Miss Heald's students at BCC where we had this very chat. She had a full ride to one institution and she could pay full freight at another. I don't know what she ended up deciding, but I explained to her that by going into college and coming out debt-free, the opportunities it affords you to potentially go and get a master's degree at a great school. There you go. She took it forward. I'm happy to hear that, Kate. To go and get a master's degree and go into debt for a great program there, or to come out debt-free knowing that you have time to select the right program for you rather than just taking a job to start paying off debt. That relieves the stress and allows you to focus on you. It allows you to focus on your personal growth, not doing what you think you have to do just to make money to pay off debt, which is a singular focus some students end up having. And of course, as parents, we care deeply about the future career pathways, the return on our investment. There are other things to consider, but these 6 pieces should all factor in to the equation. So some of the questions I often recommend students start with is, why go to college? Are you ready? How do you best learn? What do you like to learn about? As much as it might seem silly to ask the question, do you think you're ready to go to college, or why do you want to go to college? You got to tell me. Are you doing this because you recognize the potential for your growth and for your next steps? Or are you doing this because someone's telling you to do it? If it's because someone's telling you to do it, that person telling you to do it's probably not wrong. But right there off the bat, okay, let's look at good local options where you're going to pay a fraction of what you'd pay to go to a school that for a student who doesn't really want to go to school or who isn't interested in it. Community college is one of the most affordable ways to get an education. You go to Montgomery College for 2 years. You pay a nominal fee. You then graduate from that and you go into Maryland, where you go for 2 years. You've now graduated and spent maybe $60,000 over 4 years for a great education. On the other end, you have students who will pay $90,000 a year to go to NYU who graduate with $200,000 worth of debt. Are you telling me that that student's better off than the student who took the other route? Maybe. But you need to be able to ask yourself the tough question and be honest in the conversation. You need to be able to identify what it is that we as a family are comfortable with financially, what sort of people you want to be around, what it is you want to do when you grow up. You don't need to know what major, but if you want to be a doctor, everyone thinks you have to be a bio major. Anyone want to take to the chat and tell me what you think some of the most popular majors are that med schools are taking? Because it's not bio. No one wants to play my game? Fine. I'll answer. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Chemistry, public health, data analytics or something analytical, biochem, pre-med, math. So first off, pre-med is not a major. There's 5 to 10 schools out there that actually have a real pre-med major, but most schools have a pre-med organization on campus, a pre-health organization, where students of all different backgrounds can be part of it, where you can get different opportunities on campus and off campus for research, for internships, for shadowing. They'll help prepare you for the MCAT and so on. I'm seeing a lot of people commenting here about different majors, and I haven't seen either of the 2 most popular majors right now. The answer is English and music. Let that sink in. Chemistry is a great guess. Public health is a phenomenal guess. Biochem, the mix of bio and chemistry, awesome guess. Psychology, yeah. A lot of these are things that they're going to have to study and prepare for the MCAT. But the 3 things that med schools are looking for are a strong undergraduate GPA in your major, a good MCAT score, which is the 6-part test of bio, general chemistry, organic chemistry, verbal, psychology, and physics, and opportunities that you took advantage of as part of a pre-med advisory. So this English major who writes pretty well, who doesn't have too much extra work, she goes to every pre-med meeting. She gets all these opportunities. She has more time to study for the MCAT. These bio majors, they're sinking in these labs. They're struggling. They're getting a 3.6 GPA if they're lucky because of how hard it is. And because of that, they have less time for the MCAT. They have less time to go to the pre-med meetings. So as much as it may seem crazy, yep, really, wow. The major you have as an undergrad doesn't impact what happens in med school. It's those 3 factors. So when you take those things into consideration, all of a sudden the world gets turned upside down and this snow globe gets shaken because I was under the impression I need to be a bio major or a STEM major. Now, most pre-med kids want to be a STEM major. It's the thing they enjoy learning about. So I don't stop them from doing it. But it's worth considering. Is it easier to get into some colleges as an English major? Is it easier to maintain that GPA? Is it easier to find time for things outside the classroom? Your decision what to do with that information. But end of the day, what it comes down to is asking the right questions. It's not about, is this a good or bad school? Is it good for me? The number of times I've heard parents tell me, oh, Pitt's not a great school. And I go, why? And they say, well, because it's a likely school. Why is a likely school not a good school? Why is the University of Pittsburgh not a good option? Great pre-med program, great comp sci, big sports rah-rah, which students like in the middle of the city, great internship access. One of the top 25 schools in the nation right now, listed as non-Ivy Leagues for graduating and getting directly into the job market. Why is it not a good school? Oh, wow. Yeah, we had these preconceived notions. And when we start to remove those from the conversation, we put ourselves in a position where we're going to ask the right questions. So it's not what's the best college. It's what are the best colleges for me? Where can I be my best self, right? Do you need to be in a city or do you need to be removed from the city so you're not distracted? Can you go to an Ohio State or a Penn State and be part of a class that's a couple hundred people and know that you're going to show up every day that you need to get the work done? And if you have questions, wait an hour in line to talk to a professor or a teacher's assistant? Or you like me in college where you needed a teacher, your set 3rd day of school, to come knock on your door, ask if you're okay. And after you say yes, tell you that if you miss the class again, you're not getting higher than a C-. Anthropology 101, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30 in the morning. Missed it the first 2 days, didn't miss it again. Recognize what you need to be successful. And in that comes this talk about academia. We get so focused on major that we allow it to drive the decision. If you're in this chat and your interest is in nursing, chemical engineering, things of that nature, yeah, I think it makes sense to look at the schools that offer those majors because not everyone has a strong or good nursing program. Not everyone has chemical engineering, but business, bio, psychology, chemistry, comp sci, engineering, these are majors that exist at a majority of schools these days. When you consider that, when you go to Google and you type in best colleges for engineering, what's going to come up? Is it going to be a school like Worcester Polytechnic Institute? No. Great engineering school, but that's not what's going to come up. Schools that are going to come up are MIT, Caltech, Georgia Tech. And by the way, if you have the numbers and background to appeal to these schools, by all means, go for it. But all three of those schools I just mentioned have below a single-digit admit rate. So even if you do have what they expect, what are the other schools going to look at? Basing it off rankings or who has the best major won't help you there. Considering what it is you want from an engineering program, considering where you want it, and considering your background is the way to go about that conversation. Because end of the day, there are so many different aspects of this process that we sometimes don't think about. Sure, there's the decision you have to make about major, but they're the essays you write for schools. They're the things you've done outside the classroom for the past 4 years or more. They're your standardized tests for schools that want them or require them. There's your grades and your course rigor. And there's what your teachers have to say about you as a student, among other things. So before I pause for the first round of questions, remember this. The major should not define your college decision. The name of the school should not define the college decision. The questions you ask should do so. I've seen the trend is for for state schools to take more out-of-state students so they get the higher tuition. Why UMD CP is so hard to get into now? What are other options besides state schools for low-cost options? So, quite frankly, that's part of the equation for Maryland. They don't have the same out-of-state or in-state quota that like a UNC does. UNC has to take 80+% every year from in the state of North Carolina. Maryland just has to take half. But the reason that they're doing it for out of state isn't necessarily just for the money. Montgomery County, year over year for the past decade, if you look at their stats, has consistently treated Maryland as the backup option, especially Montgomery County as you get further south, BCC, Whitman, WJ, so on. So for many years now, Maryland has taken that in stride and decided, you know what, we're not doing that anymore. So while they were definitely a bit less strict about schools further north, like Damascus High School, whatnot, they really focused on other areas of the state, other counties, parts of the county where they knew students would take the opportunity to go in state. So while it's not your student's fault, past numbers and data have shown that that is how MCPS is treated Maryland. It's why they're doing it. So what are other options besides state schools for low-cost options? There are over 2,000. I do not have time to list them out today. It's why I'm telling you that if that's a factor to consider, you should be looking not at the prestige, but at what your student needs from a college. We want engineering. We want it to be no more than a 2-hour flight from home. We want it to be close to a city so that she or he or they can easily get access to an airport to get home. And my student absolutely loves football. Well, now you start looking through colleges with tools like niche.com, bigfuture.com. These are free resources out there that students can use to start narrowing down their list and researching. You can buy books like the Fisk Guide to start learning about what students do on campus, what they like about their schools, right? The point here being, you need to be in a position where you're focused on what you need to be successful. And I'm telling you right now, that also depends with the low cost on merit aid. Some schools will throw money at a strong candidate. And the number of students I see with 4.0s, even test optional these days, getting thousands and thousands of dollars from certain schools because they showed demonstrated interest at ones they care or because they're above the mean at others. There's a lot of options out there. One of the things you want to consider, if that's a focus, because they can still be state schools, go further. How many students from your area do you think apply to Penn State, from to UPitt, to Delaware, right, as backup options? Those schools aren't looking to beg students from your area to come. It's why so many students from your area don't get much aid. You know who has been giving a lot of money to students from your school or from your district? University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Ohio State's been giving a bit more money each year, I've been seeing. The University of Utah, a tier 1 research institute, lots of money to students from your area. Why? Because every year schools in those areas struggle to get kids from Maryland. So if the focus is on the low cost, there's a lot of options out there. But again, it comes back to the question of what are your needs as far as where you want to be. I see the question about extracurriculars was directly messaged to me. I am going to address that, so I promise we'll get to that shortly. Step 2 is identifying what colleges you want to research and doing the work. And I like to think of it from a shopping perspective. The first step is window shopping. When you go to the mall, I mean, I know I'm talking going to the mall. Who does that anymore? We're all online. But back in the day when you'd go to the mall, you wouldn't go into every shop and walk through and pick at each piece of clothing. You'd walk by, take a look, and see if it's of interest. Window shopping is the first phase here. You start to look at colleges, and through the questions you've asked yourself, identify through tools like niche.com, Big Future. Does the school have what I want? Is it big enough? Is it too small? Is it too far? Where is it located? What do people do for fun here? What are the most popular majors, or what are majors that are available to me here? Right? Is this in a part of the country I'd consider? One of the big conversations that I've been having, especially with some of the young ladies I work with, is whether or not they're comfortable going south for certain reasons. There are certain students I talk to who don't want to go all the way to the West Coast, despite there being good options, because it's expensive to do it. And if I want to get home for my brother's birthday, it's really hard. There are certain things to consider on those fronts. But as you're doing so, you're going to start to create a list of schools that do seem interesting. At which point you're going to enter the shop. You're going to start looking through the aisles, browsing the aisles. When it comes down to that, the way they're going to go about it from that perspective is you're going to go directly to the college website. You're going to start looking at the academic programs. You're going to start learning about what people tout about it, organizations on campus. You can even start following some of these schools on Instagram or TikTok or X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, and start seeing what they're posting about, what's important to them. For example, Georgia Tech just announced that they came in third at a cool SEAS or SEA mech engineering program nationwide. You love mech engineering, you should be following SEA to see who's posting on there, right? You love robotics, you should be following national robotics teams. You're a big debater, be following these school teams like Williams and Amherst, who year after year, or Yale have great teams, right? Go beyond just looking at them on a book if you're starting to like them. And as you do this, not only are you going to start to recognize which schools are most interesting to you, but you're also inherently going to be learning about them, taking notes, so that when it comes time to actually start applying to these schools, you can revisit your notes and reference in their essays why you like that school, because that will just make your life easier. The last piece here was trying it on. Does the college meet your expectations? There's one way that you can always know that, and that's by visiting. Now, I'll tell you right now, I don't expect you to go visit 100 colleges. That's not a great use of your time. It's a lot of money. But as you start to narrow this list down, you can go start to visit schools further from home. But you know what I recommend to every student I've met in MCPS? Go visit Maryland College Park. Go visit Towson. Go visit American University, George Washington, Georgetown University, and George Mason University. Depending on where you are in Montgomery County, the furthest one of those is probably about an hour from you. And in that, again, that's Towson, UMD, AU, GW, Georgetown, GMU. You will see 6 schools of varying size, selectivity, proximity to city. You'll get everything you need to learn about what sort of colleges you like. And from there, you can go start to consider what else you'd like based on those factors. And quite frankly, I know that not everyone has access to a car or vehicle, and that you may have to ask a friend for help in those scenarios. But an hour away is a lot more feasible than telling you to get on a plane and fly to UT Austin just to see a school that doesn't even track demonstrated interest, right? The number of people I talk to tell me they're going to do a tour through the Ivies. Okay, that's hundreds, if not thousands of dollars you're spending for schools that don't actually look if you come to campus, right? So rather than doing that right now, focus on the things that are close to home that can easily fit into your busy schedules and learn from that perspective. So 2 questions. One, how important are extracurriculars? The answer to that, generally speaking, is pretty important. Right now, your student or you as a student, you're in school from, let's call it 8 to 3, right? Your day is spoken for those, what is that, 7-ish hours? And then there's the travel in between. That's another hour. That's 9 hours. Let's hope that you're sleeping 8 hours a night. That's 17 hours. So really, any given day, you have 7 hours that aren't spoken for where you're doing homework, going to sports, whatever it may be. In college, you're going to have a lot more free time. There are going to be days where you have class at 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. and then nothing else. There might be days where you have no class. Your first class might be at 5 p.m. that day. Activities help me to see who you'll be on my campus, where I can see you around my campus. And the more selective the school, the more we care about them because we like to see pointed applicants. What are the 2 or 3 things that I know you're going to make an impact in here on my campus? You'll hear from people who talk about like, well, I do crew and I have no time for anything else. Okay. I know that's not true. I have worked with students who do crew who also have 8, 9 other activities. They fit in when crew's not in season, or they do in a very small capacity when they can just because they want to. So you can tell me that you don't have time, but maybe that means you're not managing your time as well. Maybe it means you're actually going to be recruited for crew and that should be your focus. I don't know. But point being here, there is time and activities help me to see that you manage it well and what your interests are. So extracurricular activities are important. Are there schools that focus on academic transcripts or test scores more than the other holistic factors during the admissions process? If so, which types of schools generally do this more? Not necessarily. The more selective the school, the more they're going to care about the test scores and transcripts for the most part. Your schools in the South, like the Florida State schools, Georgia State schools, Texas State schools, Purdue, MIT, many of the Ivies are bringing testing requirements back. But it's called a holistic factor for a reason. They care about all of it because every year Princeton gets 2.5 classes worth of valedictorians, the number one student at schools. And so if they only wanted valedictorians that year, they'd have to cut 1.5 classes worth. They need the holistic factors. The only ones that I would say lean more into the transcript or test scores, you're going to find that the Naval Academy leans pretty heavily into that, but they also really like leadership. But outside that, most schools care about the holistics. They want everything. Do certain schools favor you if you toured their school? Yes. At the end, ask that question again. I can post in the chat a list of schools that track demonstrated interest. But yes, there are some schools that care, some that do not. Good question. Are there any fly-in programs for college visits are any of these for reduced pricing? They do that for counselors. Not a lot of schools do that for students, but to that point, and it's a great question, they offer online information sessions and online tours. Colleges know, and they've been doing this since COVID, one of the only good things that came out of it, I think, that students can't always get there price-wise or because they're busy. So, or because of a global pandemic. So if you type a school name into Google, like University of Minnesota Twin Cities online information session, many colleges offer those, so you don't have to fly to them. And for the schools that track demonstrated interest, you can do it that way. If you're saying we just want to see some schools, not a lot of colleges do that for students. You can always reach out to ask them, but they don't often do it. What's the best way to connect with a regional admissions officer? To email them. Go to Google, type in Boston University admissions officers, find your regional admissions officer and email them and ask them a question. Also, whenever NACAC fairs are happening nearby, you should be attending them. Meet people from different schools. The NACAC fairs attract your admissions officers from those schools. Going, signing up, looking at meeting them, not a bad thing to do. Kate, thank you for posting that. All right, I see there are more questions, but there's other things to cover, so I'm going to take on these 2, and then we're going to move forward. Would a virtual visit be considered demonstrated interest? Yes. If you do a virtual online information session, you register, you type in your email, they ask you what you're interested in studying, you choose a date, you attend, that will meet the demonstrated interest need. If you just watch their YouTube video, that will not. You need to register for it. Do schools like it when you contact them, or does that not help like schools that care about interest? It can help, but like it depends what you're asking. If you're just saying, hi, my name is Jordan, I just wanted to email you to say hi, you're wasting their time. If you email them with 2 questions about their institution that you can't just be Googled, right? Like, how big is your school and what's the weather like in January? Don't do that. Yes, I've seen it. But you ask, I'm a prospective engineering student. I want to learn a bit more about how you go about engineering. Like at Case Western, every engineering student starts as a first-year engineering. You don't get to choose your specific focus until after freshman year. So reach out to your Case Western admissions officer to learn more about how students will select in sophomore year. It could be interesting. If you're interested in UVA and you want to go for business, learning more about how students are selected for their commerce program in sophomore year is important. That's right. You can apply to UVA, but you can't join the business or commerce program until sophomore year, and you have to apply. Asking questions like that can always give you a greater understanding of whether or not it's a good option for you and looks good. But visits and meeting your admissions officer either in person there or at NACAC fairs is one of the best ways to really show that interest. The other, of course, is early decision. Early decision is a binding contract where if you're admitted to schools that offer it, you're going. It bumps up your chances pretty significantly of getting in, 2 to 3-fold, depending on the school. But if cost is a factor, I strongly recommend you consider it whether or not it makes sense. You go ED to NYU and you get in, you're withdrawing your other applications. You're going to NYU. They're going to expect you to pay $90,000+ a year. And you might say, oh, well, maybe they'll give me merit aid. They won't. We're going to cover more on finances shortly. So somebody mentioned, interesting that there's a school on this list we visited and the admissions officer said they do not track demonstrated interest. This is a common phenomenon we've been seeing. Schools are going to tell you that they don't track it. And what that essentially means is that's not a big factor for them. It might be something they consider, but it's not a big factor. So if that school told you they don't track it, they may not actually go and look at it. But here's the truth. They look at who attended if they're on the list. And which list did the college curators? Okay, I'm actually not familiar with that list. I'll share another one, but Kate, I'm sure you've been using that one. Like, for example, Tufts has told students that I have worked with, they don't track it. I know they do. Why? Because I worked with the former admissions officer who told me they did. But on tours, they sometimes say stuff that they don't because it's just not as important a factor. Okay, then yeah, you said UPenn does not track demonstrated interest. They never have. So let me post the list that I use when we're done here. That said, I'm going to move on and I'll cover other questions when we can. Back to list building. When it comes to a college list, you can apply to as many colleges as you'd like. But end of the day, you want to apply to a balanced college list. There are sort of 3 different scenarios: reach, target, and likely. A reach school is a school that is very difficult to get into. Usually for a school that has a 20% or lower admit rate is a reach for most candidates, if not all. But let's say you have a 3.2 GPA. You've been struggling. You struggled in 10th grade. 11th grade wasn't that much nicer to you, and you got a number of B's and maybe a C on the transcript. You might be looking at a school that is a reach school that another student might call a target. It's different for each student. Your major can have a pretty big impact on this. Indiana University Bloomington, they're well known for the Kelley School of Business. If you do not have a 3.8 unweighted GPA and at least a 30 ACT or a 1400 SAT, really 1380, they're almost certainly the Kelley School of Business going to defer you and you're going to have to appeal. Whereas if you applied as a psychology major or a bio major, that same school for that same student would probably be closer to a target. Major can have a pretty big impact here. But end of the day, I highly encourage students to have a balanced list. You don't necessarily have to follow my suggestions, but I tend to say a perfect list from my perspective is three likelies, 3 targets, 4 to 6 reaches to give you a school of 10 to 12. But let's say that you're more focused on finances. I'd say remove all the reaches. Unless you know, and we'll cover this again shortly, that you're going to get money from the government for financial aid. Most reach schools don't offer merit aid. They don't have to. Every year I have a student who goes, well, I want to go to Brown or I want to go to Tulane or this, but only if I can get merit. I say from time to time, they'll give it, but very rarely because they know that there are going to be people lining up ready to pay full price if you're not. So the more finances are important to you, the more I'd be focused on target and likely schools. To help you identify where it falls, consider the school's overall admit rate. Consider whether or not they require test scores or how much emphasis they put on them. Consider whether or not your GPA is in their range. And also consider how involved the application process is. What does that mean? Some schools out there don't require extra essays beyond the personal statement. So let's say that you're really interested in kind of going to a school in the Northeast that's in a city, and you know that Northeastern's a bit of a stretch, but you look and you see that Northeastern right now doesn't have an extra essay. Well, maybe you take your shot at that reach school as well, because you know you have time to throw an application out there. On the opposite side, If you're like, ooh, I really like Brown, but I don't know if it's worth my time, you have to identify whether or not you want to apply and do 5 to 6 pretty tough essays that are specific to them. I don't get to make that call, but it's something that you might want to consider. Okay, so we got more questions here. Does having savings such as 529 plans hurt your chances for financial aid? It doesn't hurt them necessarily, but it is taken into consideration. Um, are there any tips you have for students with safety concerns with specific states, like if your student is trans? Listen, I'm not here to talk politics, but generally speaking, if it's a red state, the likelihood of your student being trans and feeling comfortable there is lower than if it is a blue state. So I found that the bluer the state, the more comfortable trans students tend to feel. I'd say that a majority of the students I've worked with who do identify as trans have either found themselves in the far northeast, Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, upstate New York, Massachusetts, or some of them out west in like California and the Pacific Northwest. I think those are probably the two biggest, like the two pockets I've seen trans students feel most comfortable. So you should do more reaches than targets if finances aren't concerned. I didn't say that. I'm saying that if finances are concerned, consider the opposite. Listen, I saw a student 3 years ago, and I tell this every year, a great student from Whitman, really nice kid, pretty strong applicant, great grade, strong test scores. He applied to 20 colleges, despite me telling him not to. And of those 20, and this was 3 years ago, mind you, 17 of them were what I would call hard reaches, schools that had very low admit rates. He ended up getting into, of those 20, 4 of the schools: Wisconsin, Maryland, and got honors, Emory, and USC, Southern California. That student, despite getting into Emory and Southern California, schools that are highly rejective, could not get excited about his list. He just got too many rejections. He had too many schools tell him he wasn't worthwhile. And that student ended up really struggling. So sure, if finances aren't concerned, you can apply to more reaches. But I do encourage you to consider what is in my students or what is in my best interest. Because at the end of the day, you might think I can handle it and I'm fine with my backups. It's often not the case. So yeah, if you're comfortable just having 2 or 3 backups, you want to take a shot at 8 or 9 reaches that are within your letter, kind of within your wheelhouse, go for it. But like, just because you are comfortable with reaches doesn't mean that if you have a 3.7 GPA and no test scores, you should be applying to Princeton, right? 4.0 and 1590 is barely good enough these days. So you will still have to consider what are the reaches that make sense for you. When schools say SAT optional, is it okay not to send them, or are they really still expecting them? It depends on where you're coming from. My general rule of thumb is if you're coming from Whitman, WJ, BCC, RM, schools like that, more students than less, more than not have the test score for the highly selectives. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but you have to know that that's going to have an impact. Only a couple schools have said they're test optional that haven't shown it. For example, Michigan says they're test optional. Their numbers for Maryland for MCPS doesn't show that. Villanova is the same. I haven't seen a lot of success for students who go test optional. But if a school says test optional, they are. You just have to consider that other students from your area will probably apply with test scores. And if they have that factor for one and they don't for the other, you have to imagine it's going to be something they consider. How about schools that meet 100% need that, where was that? How about schools that meet 100% need that schools have low acceptance reaches? Sure. Do you know that you meet that need? If they meet 100% of it, they mean it, but you have to show them that you need it. And that's where the FAFSA and the CSS profile, which we'll talk about momentarily, come in. Is it true that the average score for the test optional is most likely skewed up? A little bit. It is. But if it's skewed up, doesn't mean that's changing, right? If like Penn State right now, they're reporting like a 1380. 5 years ago, Penn State was in the mid-12s, right? It's because more and more students are applying with test scores. The average SAT score I saw at Maryland for MoCo, or for Montgomery County this last cycle, was around a 1450 for Maryland. Sorry, it's a great school, but for Maryland, okay? Yes, it is skewed. But if you're below that skewed number and they're test optional, you shouldn't do it because they'll take that, it'll be a detractor. You should, if it's test optional, you submit if it's 50th percentile, or if you're at the 50th percentile or higher. If you're within 10 points, that's fine. So we keep talking about finances. Let's dig in. The first thing I want everyone to consider really comes down to what is your personal financial need. Some families will say, we don't have one. So if you're comfortable with just applying to reach schools, having a couple backups, that's your prerogative. If you don't need options and it's going to take your shot, consider where you want to go, early decision, apply to a few others, have a couple backups, that's fine. But for many families, spending over, $90,000 a year may not make sense. Even $70,000 a year would be tough, and we put ourselves into debt. So one of the things I want you to consider is, what is it that you need? And one of the things that everyone here should be doing, if you are considering finances, is a net price calculator. Since 2000 and what was it, 2017 or 2016, maybe earlier, every college has been required to have a net price calculator on their website. Type into Google, Princeton, net price calculator, UMD, net price calculator, Rice, net price calculator, UCLA, net price calculator. It'll then ask you some specifics, not too many. It's not like the actual form, but if you give them the data, they'll tell you what your family's student aid index is, formerly known as expected family contribution. If these schools all say that your expected family contribution is 0, that means that you're probably going to get a lot of money from the financial government, and the schools that cover 100% of need are going to do so. If it says that you're still going to be on the hook for 30,000, they're going to meet the rest of it, but you'll still be on the hook for that 30. And that number could change given the next year based on your tax data. But I tend to say do this for about 3 to 5 schools and then average it out. From there, you'll have a good sense of whether or not you'll get any money and whether or not you should expect to be paying. For most families in Montgomery County, it tends to be that they can get partial, if not 0, but that's not everyone. And so I think it's worth looking at. But to that point, there's some terms to know. One of them is we meet 100% of demonstrated need. If you show them that you are in need, they will cover it. There's a number of schools that offer that. You can find it online, but the Ivies, for example, will cover 100% of demonstrated need and give nothing else. Okay? Net price calculator we discussed, need blind admissions. Most colleges are need blind admissions, meaning they don't look at whether or not you need financial aid to consider you. Once they admit you, if you selected yes to that, your application will just go to the financial aid office, where they'll start to put together a financial aid package. The only time that you find need blind isn't really the case is when schools tend to be filling up the last few spots. We have 8 spots left. We have 20 applicants. A lot of the time they're going to lean to the student who didn't need aid. Why? Because the unfortunate truth is they like their money. So unless they have a really good reason to consider a student that they're going to have to shell out for, they're going to take the kid who can pay full price. So some students will say something along the lines of, no, I don't need financial aid, to schools that they just want to give themselves every shot to get into, and yes to the rest. That's your call to make. But at the end of the day, it's not just about the tuition. As you can see from this example here, the cost of attendance is $20,000 higher than the tuition. So when you look up online that college's tuition is $30,000, that's great. But when you take into account the room and board, the transportation, other expenses, books, right? It adds up. So make sure that when you're looking at this stuff, you keep that in mind. Folks, I see some people, as I mentioned before, you're asking some very specific questions, which is very fair. It's going to be very difficult for me to answer those on this call. So I would suggest holding those until the end. And if we can get to them, we will. Okay. Need-based means that you're deemed by the government in need, and schools are going to cover it, or the government is going to in some capacity. For every college, for every student on this call who's going to apply for financial aid, you have to fill out the FAFSA to begin with. FAFSA. That you will do in the fall to winter of your senior year. And you'll do it every year you're in college if you're getting money. The CSS is only necessary for private schools. Why? Because the CSS is going to do a deeper dive into your personal finances. FAFSA is for state schools. We're going to get money from the state or the government, we're good. But these schools are going to pull from their endowment. You better believe they're going to want more information about your assets, right? So somebody just a little while ago asked the question, do need-based applications take account just current expenses or future expenses? They're going to look at current expenses. Just because you have 2 other kids who are coming down the pipeline isn't something that they're going to look at right now. Just because you have a house that's in the Adirondacks that costs you $600,000 doesn't mean that we're going to give you money because you spent your money there. We'd consider you want-based, not need-based. If you really don't want to pay if you don't want to go to debt, we're going to tell you, sell your house, sell the boat, sell the 4th car, whatever it may be, right? The CSS profile is going to do a deeper dive into assets. And for those of you who are really keen on like having a conversation with a true financial aid expert, I'm a former college admissions officer. I'm not a financial aid expert. I highly encourage you to reach out to this gentleman. His name is Mark Salisbury. He runs a company called tuitionfit.org where they collect a lot of data from different schools. He can give you access to the site. He does do one-on-ones for a nominal fee, but he will also be able to do a deep dive with you if you're so interested. Okay. But we keep talking about need-based. I've mentioned the term merit-based before, which is based on your test scores, your grades being above average. You're a national merit finalist or semi-finalist. Maybe the NMSQT gives you money. Maybe that school does because they want more semi-finalists this year, right? There are different things that can result in merit aid, but the thing to remember is the more selective the school, the less merit aid they tend to be willing to offer. In fact, any school that tends to be in the top 30, even 40 nowadays, gives next to no merit aid because they don't have to. They might use it for athletic scholarships to get that kid they really wanted towards an NIL deal, honestly, that it gets paid part by the school, part by the board. But most schools that are uber selective, they know they're going to get their students. So when it comes to money, the more you focus on prestige, the less likely it is you're going to see merit. But when you remove that, you consider what are some schools that offer merit based just on like test scores or grades? Many state schools will have something like this on their website where you can type in Alabama scholarships. And if you have a 3.5 GPA and a 1400 plus SAT, you might get over 4 years 100,000 plus, 25,000, 26,000 a year, right? If you have a perfect SAT score and you're a 3.5 or 3.6 candidate, you might get a full ride. There's a number of schools who have this information available. No, that's not UNC or UVA or Michigan. It's Alabama. It's Iowa. It's Minnesota. It's Utah. It's some of the less selective state schools that are looking to help students who are high scoring, but also want to keep price in mind, understand where they can go and pay a lot less money. So that being said, the only other thing I was going to point out here is that there are also outside websites that you can apply for scholarships. Okay. These scholarships are ones that are offered by different companies, different organizations, different nonprofits. And no, they're not the 4-year, $25,000 scholarships. There's a couple of them out there, but millions apply to them. This is a place where starting early in senior year, even late in junior year with ones like goingmarried.com, you can start to accumulate that money. And maybe if you apply to enough of these alongside your applications, you just paid for it, but you get enough scholarship money to pay for 1 year of the 4 years of college. And then you get to take the rest and amortize over 3, right? So one of the things I always recommend is, if this is something that's keenly on your mind, this summer, current juniors, rising seniors, this summer into fall, do your very best to get your application work done and done well and out of your hands so that through late fall into midwinter, early spring even, you can be applying to these scholarships and racking up that money because you're done with your applications. I know we've covered a lot here, and I see there are a number of different questions coming through. So one quick thing before we wrap up and we get to questions. Juniors, rising seniors, if you do not have a college list right now, I will tell you, you are behind. Every year I work with about 25 to 30 students. All 25 to 30 of those students have a college list. It may not be fully finalized, but they essentially know which ones they're considering, where they're going to do visits this summer, who they need to do online information sessions for, and are starting to consider if they want to go ED here or what they want to narrow down. Get to the research now. Number 2, consider what it is that makes you who you are and use that to identify what it is you want from a college. Don't let somebody else tell you, oh, I think you'd be great at this school. If they do tell you, say why. Don't just say, okay. Ask them why they think it's a good option for you. They may know you, but do they know you as well as you do? Find out. And number 3 is create yourself a game plan. You don't need a college counselor. We exist for a reason. We help project manage, we help students stand out, but you don't need one. If you do this the right way and you give yourself time on a weekly to bi-weekly basis to get things done, you can do it because millions of people do it every year. That in mind, if you do want to learn more about what we do, go ahead and scan that QR code. I have my email here, so you can reach out if you have any questions after this. We have about 9 minutes left, so let's dig into questions. I'm going to scroll back up here. Can you please speak to East Coasters interested in the UC schools, in this case, UC Santa Cruz? Yeah. So the UCs are, for those who don't know, they're the University of California state school system. There's two state school systems out there, the UCs and the Cal States. The UCs are sort of like the upper echelon to some people. The UCs are very focused on social uplifting right now within the state. And because of the state sanctions, they have to take more and more in-state students every year. So for students applying to the UCs, three things. One, the UC PIQs, the personal insight questions, have been released, just like the Common App personal statement essay. You can do that this summer. Number two, since the UCs don't track demonstrated interest, you have to consider what it is that they want. They're going to be looking for a student who has academic rigor, who's going to come to their campus and kind of add to it, the extracurriculars. And since they're test blind, they don't look at letters of rec. Really what they care about is that you're continuing to push yourself academically. So student interested in UC Santa Cruz, you had 2 APs in junior year, try and take 3 or more in senior year. Show them you're continuing that upward trend. I'm a huge fan of Santa Cruz. Go Banana Slugs. Good for you. I hope that works out for you. Do need-based, oh, I answered that. What is your advice for a kid that has very good but not great numbers, GPA, ACT for Whitman, but really focused arts, theater, stats on how to package? Well, I would say that one of the most important things is that you're able to show colleges that if you're going to pursue the arts or theater stats, what you bring. Most colleges are going to offer you the opportunity to upload a portfolio. So this summer, I'd be pursuing opportunities that allow me to continue to show my interest in the arts and theater stats, whether that's working at a local place with kids and teaching them these things, whether it's continuing to build on your own interests and creating your own stuff and getting that portfolio ready. And regardless, it depends on how talented you are, right? Some students may not have great grades, but get into RISD, one of the best programs for it out there. Some students who have great grades, but not the talent, don't. So you have to identify what level your talent is and what sort of schools would be good options for that. There's a lot of different arts and theater arts in there. But for example, Emerson in Boston, great option. A lot of theater and performing arts options. You're in a city, they give a lot of money. Whereas everyone seems to think, no, I need to go to something like a RISD. If your GPA and numbers aren't great, that's okay. You got to identify schools where your opportunities will be afforded to you in the arts and theater arts. So I would focus more on schools that are mid-tier selectivity, but that have the programs you want. I know that MCPS has a much lighter grading system than other counties in the DMV. I have heard that UMD has rejected many MCPS kids for that reason. Do other colleges know that this is the case too? For example, if they see an MCPS kid with a 4 and a Loudoun County kid with a 4. So for that, there's a lot that to address there. One, MCPS is in-state, Loudoun is not, right? So right there, those students already wouldn't be compared to each other. Number two, there's a reason that MCPS is trying to reverse what they've done for the last few years, right? Where they allowed an A one quarter, a B the next quarter result in an A. Because it's not because schools like MCPS are recognizing it, it's because their kids are having a harder time standing out. Because they now have so many kids who have a high GPA who one kid might not have worked as hard as the other, right? But that wasn't the reason that UMD did it. Like I said before, is because MCPS kids continually choose schools over UMD. Now, do other schools know this? Only if your school puts in the school report, which I'd be very surprised if they do. What your school likely puts in the school report is the percentage of students who have a 4.0. Now, when that number is really high, schools can make an assumption, but you have to remember, most colleges are going to spend 7 to 8 minutes on your application. They're not going to have time to do that deep dive into whether or not MCPS has a lighter grading system. But when you have 100 kids from from two schools with 4.0s, in similar, but like one has a 5 APs, one has 3 APs, you start leaning more on the course rigor. So until that goes into effect with the quarter system change, the course rigor is going to matter even more for MCPS. Aren't the common data set skewed toward higher SAT scores now because only students with high scores submit? Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't change the fact that that is the data and that's what we have to work off of. Until a school goes test required, you're going to continue to see it go up because people are only going to submit when they're at the 50th percentile or higher. But yes, the common data set is slightly skewed, but just because it's skewed doesn't mean that it's wrong right now. That is the data. Is it advantageous to do dual degree programs through MoCo? Sounds like a great idea, but heard only a handful of students do that at our school. Is it advantageous? It can be. So here's something that doesn't make it advantageous. Some students will decide to do dual enrollment stats because they heard it's online and easier than AP stats. If your school offers the AP level, you should not be doing dual enrollment unless you just couldn't get into the AP, but you're more likely to be able to get into AP than the dual enrollment. Let's say that your student's interested in psychology. They did AP Psych in junior year. Senior year, there's a course in abnormal psychology at MoCo, and they want to dual enroll in that. Then it makes a lot of sense. Do dual enrollment because it's something that allows you to pursue your interests further, not because it is the easier option. Do the very elite schools discount application if they see you've applied to a lot of them? They can't see who you've applied to. They don't know who else you applied to. So no. What advice do you have for a student with a multitude of extracurricular activities that all fall under liberal or performance arts and a number of AP and IB classes, but are somewhat scattered? I can't, there's not a lot of advice I can give that will apply to everyone here, and I'm not quite sure what the question is. My advice would be to continue to push yourself academically in senior year. It'd be to continue to pursue the activities of interest, but I'm not sure that addresses your question. Yes, someone asked about this slide. Here you go. I'm in early college right now, full-time MC. How does that affect my GPA and how colleges see that? Well, so keep in mind that something like early college is going to be very beneficial for your in-state schools. Early college can be really helpful for a UMD, a UMBC, a UMD Eastern Shore, Towson, and so on and so forth. Schools outside of Maryland or private schools, they'll know less about it. But how would it affect your GPA and the way colleges see that? It wouldn't really change. It would be like if you have grades that are coming from your early college program, right? You'd take those grades, you take your grades from your high school, you'd average them out, and that's the grade point average you'd put in the application, and then you'd send your MoCo transcript and your school transcript, and colleges will then recalculate the GPA they see fit, usually focus on 10th and 11th grade on core curriculum classes. That being said, the way early college helps the most is with in-state schools. What's your advice for an applicant with 60-ish credits of coursework that's collegiate in terms of rigor, but very few extracurriculars? My advice would be to focus on institutions that are seeking students who are more interested in academia than anything else, right? That said, just being very frank with you, schools in the top 30 are going to have students who have that and 10 activities. The activities piece is something colleges care about. We don't just want, like the way that an admissions officer I met a while ago said, we don't just want the bookworm. I don't want you just sitting in your dorm room. I want you connecting with the campus around me, and extracurriculars help me to see that. So my advice would be to use this summer to boost your extracurriculars. I'm sorry, people are starting to ask some very personal and specific questions. I'm not going to be able to address those tonight. What is the function of weighted GPAs for college applications? The function of weighted GPAs is it essentially shows a college how much rigor you had, right? A student who had 14 APs is going to have, generally speaking, assuming they had all A's, a higher weighted GPA than a student who had 3 APs. But end of the day, quite frankly, weighted GPAs don't matter. Colleges are going to look at your transcript, as I just mentioned. They're going to weight it as 10th. They're going to look at 10th and 11th grade. They're going to remove weight a lot of the time to just compare the grades to begin with. And then they'll have a separate section to show how many APs, how many IBs, how many dual enrollment credits, so on were taken. That in mind, I have time for, I think, one more question here. From viewpoint of reach schools like MIT, how do they in practice view courses from taken at Montgomery College when BCC, for example, doesn't offer AP electric and magnetism or other hard sciences? How can BCC students compete with magnet school kids for X when they cannot take the same classes in reality? The very same way you just mentioned. Your job, if you're that passionate, you want to stand out to them, is to find a way to do it. Example, you can take that class through BYU Online. Brigham Young University offers AP courses that you can take online. You could take it through Montgomery College if they're offering it. You could find it at Northern Virginia Community College online in the fall. There are options to take these courses. And Kate, I know that Physics C is available at BCC. I had a student who did it this year. Are you saying that was just electricity and magnetism? or that wasn't available, because I know a student who's in Physics C right now, and I think it's E&M. So I'm not sure that that's the case. I'm pretty sure that BCC does offer it. It might be that it was full this year or that they don't have it next year, but I don't think that's the case. Oh, it's only mechanics. So then, yeah, I would try and take it either online through BYU or through a local community college. That in mind, it is now 7:32. I've run